to finish just kind of the background of Shakespeare before we get into Midsummer Night's Dream. In 1599, I think I had up on the board the other day, or mentioned, one of the first theaters, actual separate physical playhouses, built in London for seeing plays, was a building called, it's not going to go down anymore, was a building simply called the Theater, built in 1575 by James Burbage. In 1599, the lease on the property that the theater was built on ran out. So the people who were using the theater, which was Shakespeare's acting company, decided rather than just have the lease fall through and the property, okay, that was built on the property, become the owner of the land's property, they dismantled the theater. They literally took it apart, and they moved it a few miles south across the river, across the Thames River, in an area of outside London called Southwark. When they did that, they renamed it. That became the Globe. Okay? So its original name was the Theater. When it gets rebuilt, it's called the Globe. The foundations for that theater were discovered in the late 1980s under an apartment building, or in the process of building an apartment complex in London. If you go to London today and you go to Shakespeare's Globe, the Shakespeare's Globe that you go to is about a quarter mile, taking my directions here, quarter mile west of where the original Shakespeare's Globe was. But if you visit the Globe that you see is an exact replica. In fact, it's built using the same materials and built in the same construction methods. The only thing that's a little bit different is, because of what happened in 1613 when the Globe burned down, now in the layer of thatch roofing, there is a layer of steel and asbestos. It's not asbestos, it's some other kind of fire retardant. So that if the thatch catches fire, it won't burn all the way through. In June of 1613, they were doing a production of Henry VIII. A cannon fires off, but some of the wadding that was in the cannon, there weren't cannon balls, it was essentially blanks, but some of the paper wadding or cloth wadding that was in the cannon fired out, landed on the thatch roof, and burned to the ground in a matter of just a couple of hours. Okay, it was not rebuilt after that. 1623, First Folio. The First Folio, and I should have brought it in. The First Folio is the first collected edition of all of Shakespeare's plays. Okay? Prior to the First Folio, only about half of Shakespeare's plays had ever been published. So the First Folio is our only source, really, for about half of his plays. And remember, I think we talked about the other day, he wrote 37 plays. Some people say 39 because we know he assisted a couple of other playwrights. But in terms of plays solely authored, Shakespeare writes 37 of those. Okay? And the First Folio, as I said, is the first publication for over half of those. And it's this big, massive book. It's about yay tall by yay wide by about another half again as thick as this one. Okay, it's really huge. And they're extremely rare. If you find one, somewhere, even a partial one, you're talking tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. Full, complete editions, if they go on the market, which they really don't anymore, they're millions of dollars, okay, because there are so few of them around. The one library in the world that has the most copies of it is the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C. Folger was a railroad tycoon who for some reason took a shining to Shakespeare and started buying up as many of the first folios as he could in the late 19th, early 20th centuries. Okay, that's background. Midsummer Night's Dream. What kind of play is this? Louder. It's a comedy. It's a romantic comedy. Not all the comedies are romantic comedies, but the more famous ones are, or the more commonly performed ones are. Okay? Written sometime, we're not exactly sure, around 1595, 1596. And it centers around, well, there's a couple of different themes, but the main theme really is love. Okay? And you were supposed to read, I think, 1 and 2, according to the syllabus, 3 for today, but we won't get to Act 3. When the play opens, who's getting ready to get married? Theseus and Hippolyta. Who's Theseus? Duke of Athens. Okay, this is Greek mythology, by the way. Theseus is a mythological character, fought the Minotaur, other things. Who's Hippolyta? Queen of the Amazons. Okay? So Theseus, in Greek myth, Theseus and his troops defeated Hippolyta and her troops. Okay? The result of that is she agrees to marry him. In fact, we're going to see a line. He's going to say, I wooed thee with my sword and did injuries to you. She was actually injured in battle. And for some strange reason, that gives her the hots for him. I mean, she falls in love with him, apparently, because of that. Or she's merely spoils of war. You wouldn't think spoils of war, though, count as, wooing or courting or whatever. Okay? So the general outline for the first act is the play opens with Theseus speaking, and he says, boy, the time's going by slow. Notice, 4 days until we wed. And he talks about how slowly the days are going by, etc. Okay? Hippolyta, line 7. 4 days will quickly steep themselves in night. 4 nights will quickly dream away the time. Notice, he's saying it's going to take a long time. She's saying, nope, that time's going to go by quickly. All right? So, Theseus then tells one of his servants to go stir up the Athenian youth. That is, tell people we need something to go on for our wedding ceremonies, for the festivities after the actual ceremony. Okay? He says that, and then another character enters, Aegeus. We're not told much about Aegeus, other than that he has a daughter. Okay? That introduces the initial conflict or complication in the play. Because what's going on, leave these guys out for a moment. What's going on between Aegeus and his daughter Hermia? Notice, by the way, it's a father and a daughter. Louder. Forcing her to get married. To whom? To Demetrius. Why doesn't she want to marry Demetrius? She doesn't love him. Okay? He says that you need to marry Demetrius. Okay? And he's come to the Duke because what does he want the Duke to do? Make her obey me. That's what he wants. He's appealing to the state to essentially enforce his will on his daughter. But then he also says, he has Demetrius come forth, says he has my blessing to marry my daughter. And then he tells this other character, where did he go? Lysander to step forth. Okay? And he says, but Lysander has vexed her. Line about 28 or so. Thou, Lysander, thou hast given her rhymes and interchanged love tokens with my daughter, with my child. What does he mean by rhymes? Does he mean roses are red? Poems, poetry. He's written love songs to her. Okay? And he's done other things with feigning voice. He's sung to her outside her bedroom at night. He gives all these different indications that tell us this play could easily be what other famous play by Shakespeare that you probably read in junior high or high school? Romeo and Juliet. Okay? So, Theseus, notice, he doesn't just immediately say, this is the law. No, he asks Hermia, well, what do you have to say about this? Be advised, fair maid. Line 45. To you, your father should be as a god. Okay. First big problem for 2018 audience. You can't read this from the mindset of somebody living in 2018 America. First of all, at the very least, you need to try to go back to Shakespeare's day. So mid-1590s. Better, you need to try to go back to ancient Greece. Okay? Because there's a huge shift between ancient Greece and Shakespeare's day, just as there's a huge shift between Shakespeare's day and our day. Ancient Greece, what kind of status did women have? Yeah, none. None. Worse than slaves, really. Okay? So when he says, to you, your father should be as a god, he means, to you, as a daughter, your father's will, his every statement should be like the gods speaking to you. Yes, Lord, what shall I do? Okay? But that's also because of her gender. You don't have any room to speak against a man. Now, we're going to see this even more in a couple weeks when we get to a play written in ancient Greece about a woman who stands up to a man. Not only stands up to a man, the man happens to be the king. And she essentially flips him off. He breaks his law. And we know that's troublesome because when he finds out it's her, everything he talks about is, if I don't do something, then I'm essentially being emasculated, being castrated. Ain't going to let that happen. I mean, men have got to rule. I mean, it's the whole 9 yards. You want to talk about a patriarchal society? There you have it. Okay? So, he says to her, Demetrius is a worthy gentleman. In other words, what's wrong with Demetrius? In Demetrius, my thinking, if I were casting the play, if I were directing the play, Demetrius ought to be handsome. You know, Chris Hemsworth. And maybe have Liam Hemsworth as Lysander. Because Lysander's going to say some things in just a moment. Hermia, so is Lysander. That is, he's also worthy. Yes, notice Theseus doesn't go, nah, look at him. Lysander's short and dumpy and fat. But, I mean, Thor, you know. In himself he is. But in this kind, the but means except. In this instance, what? He doesn't have your father's voice. That is, he doesn't have your father's assent. The other, therefore, Demetrius is worthier. That's it. Because your father approves Demetrius, he's better. So, Hermia, I would my father look but with my eyes. What does she mean? I wish you could see him the way I do. If he looked at Lysander the way I do, what? She's implying. He would love Lysander. He would favor Lysander. Theseus, rather your eyes must with his judgment look. Notice, she is saying her eyes look at Lysander and she sees what? Big fat heart. Love. He says, you must train your eyes to look with what? Your father's judgment. That's not the heart. Judgment means what? Pros and cons. That's reason. You must look with your father's reason. Okay? Hermia. Okay. So, let's say I don't go along with what Dad wants. Tell me what I can expect. What's going to happen to me if I don't marry Demetrius? She asks. Well, okay, if you want to be blunt. Either to die the death, Athenian law, Aegeus suggested earlier, says, you don't follow my will in this matter, you are put to death, you are executed. So, do that, or abjure forever the society of men. Give up the society of men for the rest of your life. Be a virgin. That's why he says, know of your youth, examine well your blood. Your gloss tells you your passions. What's he really mean? Use 2018 language. Your sexual desires. Okay? She's not 30 years old. She's young. She's a teenager, more than likely. Okay? Know of your youth, examine well your blood, whether, if you yield not to your father's choice, you can endure the livery, the clothing, of a nun. Not a nun to Jesus or Mary, because they're not around. A nun to who? The goddess Diana, the goddess of chastity and virginity. You don't marry Demetrius, you will never have sex ever in your life. Can you do that, Hermia? He asks. To live a barren sister all your life, blah, blah, blah. So will I grow, so live, so die. Grow, she means I will become that, and then I will live that way after becoming that, and I will die. Before what? She says, ere I will yield my virgin patent up. Okay? Patent. Privilege. Before I give it up to him. He says, whoa, 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 whoa. You don't have to decide now. He says, 4 days. Yeah, that was good. Decide in 4 days. What's happening in 4 days again? He's getting married. So now what is possibly going to happen the very day of his marriage? She might die the very same day. There might have to be a public execution, like the morning of his wedding. I don't know about you, but that would kind of put the kibosh on a positive wedding ceremony, especially considering who he's marrying. Who are the Amazons? Come on, most of you have seen Wonder Woman at least. Louder? Fierce warrior women. Keep going. What purpose do men serve in Amazonian society? Sperm donors. That's pretty much it. And slaves. You really think she's going to like this idea of forcing this young girl to either die or give it up to somebody she doesn't love? Okay. Demetrius, relent, praised Hermia. And then he looks to Lysander. Lysander, you that crazy title. Lysander, you ever father's love Demetrius? Let me have Hermia's. Do you marry him? Okay, now back up for a moment. Who's playing Hermia? A man or a young boy. Or let me back up. A young boy or a young man up to the age of maybe 20, 22. Not much older than that. Young boy as young as 11, 12. So voice hasn't changed. But 20 or 22, they're having to pretend to have the high voice, you know. Okay? So when when Lysander says, you have her father's love, let me have Hermia's, do you marry him? Notice, what is that suggesting? Do you, male, marry him? Male. 1595, 1596 London, big no-no. Homosexuality, capital crime. That's cause for execution. Okay? Ancient Greece, not so much. All right? So, Lysander kind of enters the mix and says, I am as well derived as he. What does he mean, derived? Family history. I've got as good a name as he does. You know, I'm a Vanderbilt. Yeah, well, I'm a Carnegie. That's what he's saying. What else? I am as well proportioned as he. That's why I said Chris Hemsworth, Liam Hemsworth. They're about the same. My fortune's everywhere is fairly ranked. We both have similar wealth. In fact, he says, actually, if not with vantage. Actually, if we were to pull out our checkbooks, I've got a little bit more than he does. Okay? And what's more, notice he's building to a conclusion. What's his coup de grace? What's his summation? She loves me. Why should he get her? And then he says one other thing. He made love to Nader's daughter, Helena. Made love doesn't mean had sex with. It means he wooed her. He took her out on dates. He will say, he won her heart. How badly, how greatly did he win her heart? How madly is Helena in love with Demetrius? Man, she is crazy in love. She is head over heels, as we'll see maybe in a few minutes. Okay? And Theseus says, yeah, I heard that. And I meant to talk with Demetrius about that. So Theseus, Aegeus, Demetrius, and their train all leave. So we have Hermia, Lysander, left on the stage. And then Helena comes in. So Hermia and Lysander talk for a bit. And what idea does Lysander throw out? What does he suggest they do? Louder? Run away, right? Let's elope. Where? To the wood. Why to the wood? Okay. What does he say? I have an old dowager aunt, and he says, let's run off to her place about, off in the wood outside Athens, where what of Athens doesn't reach? The law. Okay? Athens represents law, order, reason, rationality, civilization. The wood, the exact opposite of all of those. So, anarchy, chaos, irrationality, barbarism, if you want, to oppose civilization. Okay? It's the exact opposite of what Athens is. So he says, let's go off there, and notice, they'll have to live there the rest of their lives. They can't get married there and come back in and go, ha ha, we beat you. No. And she's like, okay, good idea. Helena comes in. And they talk with Helena a bit. Hermia tells Helena, after Lysander, he's still there. Hermia tells Helena what they're going to do, and then they leave. Okay, Hermia and Lysander. Helena's left alone on the stage. She gets a soliloquy. It's not this deep, powerful soliloquy where she is unburdening her heart to us, but she's telling us what she really thinks. All right? And what does she do? She talks about love. And what love is able to do. She says, I'm going to tell Demetrius. Demetrius thinks not so. That is, that I am as fair as Hermia. Demetrius doesn't think I'm as fair as Hermia. Why? He's in love with Hermia. So she says, as he errs, doting on Hermia's eyes, line 230, so I, admiring of his qualities, things base and vile, holding no quantity, love can transpose to form and dignity. That is, things base and vile, common, ordinary, low things. Apply that to people. I'm not saying common, ordinary, low people. I'll be blunt. Unattractive people. Love can do what to? We have a phrase. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You might fall in love with somebody that other people go, ooh, really? I don't see how that works. But for the beholder, it's the beholder's vision of that person that does what? Beautifies that person. Might turn lead into gold. Okay? That's what she is saying. Love can transpose, can change to form and beauty things base and vile. Okay? What does Demetrius now think of Helena? She is something base and vile. She is hoping she can convert him to love her, in which case he will then what? See her as something with form and dignity. Something beautiful. Okay? Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind. The mind? What is she talking about? How can love look with the mind? She's kind of saying pros and cons. Love is rational, in other words. Okay? And therefore is winged Cupid painted blind. So she goes on and says, because of all this, I'm going to tell Demetrius, and then I'm going to follow him off into the wood. Even though at this point she knows he hates her. Scene 2. We're still in Athens. Only now we have what? Things base and vile. We have the group of characters called the rude mechanicals. Why rude? Rude there doesn't mean they have poor manners. It means they're uneducated. Mechanicals, because they spend their days working with their hands. Not mechanics per se, but you have whom? You have Quint, the carpenter, Snug, the joiner, Bottom, the weaver, Flute, the bellows mender, Snout, the tinker, Starveling, the tailor. Every single one of them works with his hands. He doesn't work necessarily with his mind. Right? What is their purpose? Louder? They're going to put on a play for the wedding. They hope. They're going to learn the lines. They're going to practice the play. They don't know that their play will be chosen because all the Athenian youth are doing this apparently. Okay? What other purpose do they serve? How about comic relief? Notice, Act 1, Scene 1 ends, and what has been built up? Some suspense and tension. After all, we don't know what is going to happen in 4 days' time. Will Hermia marry Demetrius? Or will she die? Or will she remain a virgin the rest of her life? Burning questions we want to know the answers to. So what does Shakespeare do? He ratchets the tension down a little bit. How? Because he gives us Bottom the Weaver, the ass. So that in Act 3, we're going to see Bottom the Weaver literally transformed into an ass. Or at least his head will be. Okay? So we see them, and they talk about the play they're going to put on, the most lamentable comedy of Pyramus and Thisbe. Pyramus and Thisbe, another Greek myth. These were two people whose love for each other was so great, they died. Why did they die? Well, according to the myth, according to this version, let's put it this way. What happens? This is what we're going to get at the play within the play, at the very end of the play. They are supposed to meet. Pyramus goes to find Thisbe. Thisbe has been frightened off by a lion, accidentally leaves her shawl behind, which has blood on it. Pyramus assumes the lion has eaten her, and this is all that's left. He pulls out his sword and he kills himself. Thisbe comes to where they're supposed to meet. She sees dead Pyramus. She takes his sword and kills herself. Why? Because she can't live without him. He can't live without her. What play do we have? Romeo and Juliet. Remember I said, I think the other day, every comedy can become a tragedy. Every tragedy can become a comedy. Okay? At the end of Act 1, Scene 1, you're not sure yet. I mean, this play could easily go south and become a pretty bad tragedy. All right? Hold on a second. Wake up. I can never remember. So, they put on, or they start their practicing. We get the players get their parts, and what do we see Nick Bottom doing? Notice, you're going to be Pyramus. Oh, great. Who's Pyramus? He says, is he a tyrant or a lover? And Peter Quince tells him he's a lover who dies most gallantly for death. He's like, okay, I can do that. But I'd really like to be a tyrant. Okay? So then Flute gets his part. Flute's going to be what? Thisbe. What's Thisbe, he asks. A wandering knight? No, she's the woman that Pyramus falls in love with. And what does Flute say? No, not me. Why? I've got a beard. Coming. What's that tell us about Flute? He's young. Teens. He doesn't yet have a beard. It's coming. That is, he might have a few whiskers. He's like, yes, grow, No, I can't play that part. He's saying, I'm too old to play that part, etc. Okay? What does Bottom do? Oh, let me play Thisbe too. And then he says, let me play the lion. What are we being shown about Bottom? He's a fool. Okay? Bit of an egomaniac, but not in the sense that he thinks he's the only one. He just wants to do it all. So, that ends Act 2. Notice, Act 1, Scene 2, was still in Athens. Act 2, Scene 1, we're now in the wood. And who are we introduced to? Right off the bat, the fairies. Our fairies part of law, order, reason, civilization. No, they're not. Especially if you know the medieval lore behind them. Okay? They're not. The medieval idea of fairies and elves and stuff are not Shakespeare's little tiny ones, that can sit in a cap. They're Tolkien's elves, like these Nordic, 6'5", blonde Chris Hemsworths. Okay? Shakespeare diminishes them. He makes them small, which is why Tolkien didn't like Shakespeare very much. Okay? So we have a couple of fairies come in, Puck and another fairy. And the other fairy says, who he is. And Puck says, the queen better not come here because Oberon is really mad with her. And he kind of says why. There's a changeling child she has that Oberon wants to be a knight in his train following him, and she won't give him up. So what's a changeling? Again, this is a medieval idea. It's when the fairies come into your home at night, and assume this is a baby for a moment, and take this baby to replace it with one of theirs. Okay? For what purpose? One, to play around with us. The idea is that we, people in the Middle Ages, came up with this notion of changelings as a means of saying, well, a kid can't be mine, because my kid would never do that. Someone from me wouldn't behave that way. It's like in the Avengers film, when they're standing there on the flying, aircraft carrier at least, and they're talking about Loki. And what does Thor say? He's adopted. He's not blood to me, actually. The idea of changeling is I can pass that problem off. Well, that's not mine. Actually, it's a changeling. My real child was kidnapped, taken away by the fairies to the fairy kingdom and such. So, Oberon wants this little child. And so the fairy says, am I mistaken? Or are you Puck, Robin Goodfellow? And what does he say about Puck? You're the one who likes to play tricks on the country milkmaids. Lead wanderers in the dark astray to harm. Notice, he's not just a common, ordinary, happy-go-lucky, hey, let's play a practical joke on somebody. The practical jokes that Puck plays can result in what? Death. Okay? So Puck says, yeah, that's me. Oberon and Titania come in. And what do we see? Immediately, Oberon, Titania, do they rush to each other? No. They're what? They're butting heads from the get-go. What does he call her? He says, ill met by moonlight, proud Titania. What? Jealous Oberon? And what do they start hammering each other about? His love for Hippolyta and her love for Theseus. Okay? And they keep going back and forth. And Titania has a fairly long speech, beginning around line 81 or so and ending 116, in which she says, because of our marital problems, there are what? There are problems in the natural world. Winter has overstayed its bounds. The crops are dying. The animals aren't giving life birth, etc. There's all these issues in the rest of the natural world. And what does Oberon say? Well, you can fix that. Do you amend it then? It lies in you. Why should Titania, line 119, cross her Oberon? How can she amend it? And then we'll be happy again. And once they are happy, the implication is the natural order of things will be all in sync again. Okay? She says, forget it. Your entire fairy kingdom could not purchase the child from me. Why? Why is she so hung up about this little boy? The woman who gave birth to him, she says, was a votress of my order. That is, she kind of worshiped me. She's dead. The implication is she died in childbirth. And this is kind of Titania honoring that sacrifice. So, how long are you going to be here? Till the wedding. Okay. She leaves, and Oberon says, nope, you're not going to leave this wood until I get that little boy from you. So what does he do? Notice we've now had multiple complications. We not only have Hermia and her father, Lysander, Demetrius, now we have Oberon, Titania. He says, okay, Puck, calls Puck forward, and he tells him to go get that plant, love and idleness, so that he can do what? The next time Titania's asleep, I'm going to put that in her eyes so that when she wakes up, she'll fall in love with what? Whatever she wakes up next to. Notice what he says. Not Chris Hemsworth, not Liam Hemsworth, not ladies, whatever, actor you'd like to wake up next to, but what? Bull, boar, bear, leopard, cat. A beast. Okay? So that she will be in love with that thing. And because she'll be in love with that thing, she won't be seeing correctly. And he says, and I'll work on her when she's in kind of that state, and I'll get the little boy from her. Okay? So, Puck goes off to find the flower. Oberon tells us what he's going to do. And in come Demetrius and Helena. And notice, just before they come in, what does Oberon do? He's still on the stage. He says, I am invisible. He does his Obi-Wan trick. He doesn't literally, he just tells the audience, I am invisible. Well, he's what kind of being? Not us. He's a fairy. If you know medieval fairy lore, they can be seen sometimes, and other times they can't be seen. So that somebody's just walking on along and they suddenly trip. Well, that's because a fairy stuck his leg out and tripped you. Better that excuse than that on my clutch, right? Okay. So Demetrius and Helena come in, and what does Oberon see? And I'm going to stop at the end of this scene. He sees Demetrius scorning Helena. And he kind of looks at Helena and goes, she's not so bad. Why doesn't he love her? And he says, nymph, talking about Helena, which raises her. A nymph is a goddess. It's a low level goddess, but goddess nevertheless. He says, before you leave this wood, he is going to be chasing you. So he tells Puck what he's going to do. Find the Athenian youth. He says, put that love juice in his eyes. Puck's kind of like, you'll know him by the clothes he wears. Well, how many Athenian youths have they seen in the woods so far? Youth is masculine, by the way. Just Demetrius. Shouldn't be hard. Okay? We'll stop there. We'll pick up with scene 2. Read through the end of the play. I won't give you a quiz over the whole play on what day is today? Wednesday, on Friday. I'll give you a quiz over the whole play on Monday. Okay?